Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to our Wednesday morning class. Again, coming to you from HeartLight Spiritual Center here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We want to welcome you that are here this morning. Thank you for coming. And you that might be joining us online, live and later. We want to welcome you to this class. The class that we're entering into at this time for a while to see kind of how this plays out is on Gnosticism, I should say. I want to remind you of a vision that I was given 61 years ago when I received my calling, or whatever you want to call it, but the beginning of what would become my ministry, my dharma, my purpose, was the fact that I was asked by this brilliant presence of light. It was a light I cannot explain, that would not in any way be third dimensional. It was a living, pulsating light. Of course, 61 years ago, all I knew was that light probably was Jesus, because that was what I was taught. But I actually saw no form of any person. But in this experience, the light said to me, and I'm going to be careful, because said to me doesn't mean I hear a human audible voice, but it was formed in my consciousness. Imagine somebody writing a word in the sand. That's the way it works for me. When I say something spoke to me, it's like it carves it in my consciousness, and I see it. And then I have to interpret it in a way that I understand it. But it said to me, go and gather 12 yellow roses. And I just remember being so excited. You know, I was just a young, new Christian, and just starting out. I was fresh, I was vulnerable, I just loved God and loved Jesus and loved everything, and was just in that place. So I was very honored and thrilled that it said to me to go and gather these yellow roses. So in this inner vision, I went down the street to a florist, and when I walked into the florist shop, my heart just sank, because everything was wilted and old and just not nice at all. And I thought, well, I can't present this. And as I was about to leave, my inner vision caught one of the most perfect, beautiful yellow rosebuds I've ever seen. It was just luminously yellow. Now remember, yellow is wisdom in the colors of the seven spirits, seven manifested of the spirits. So I purchased that, and I thought, no, it said 12. So to make a long story short, I ended up going to a lot of different florists, because all of them did not have anything that I wanted to present, but I would find one or two perfect rosebuds. So I ended up with 12 by going to all these different florists. And I came back to present this to this presence. And the presence said to me, now go and gather all the fragments of truth in all religions. And when you gather that together and you give it unto the people, even unto the least, you have given it unto me. I didn't know what that meant at that time, but I do now, because I have literally done my best to not shut myself down to any religions or schools of thought that is out there. I've been willing to go into them. A lot of them was mostly what I did not agree with at that time, but I always found something. Whether it's Buddhism, Hinduism, even Muslim, it doesn't matter. Whatever it's been, Course in Miracles, metaphysics, New Thought, positive thinking, all these things have given me fragments of truth that I've gathered to myself. And the thing was, I didn't get stuck with any one of them as an absolute. Are you with me? Because I don't believe any one school of thought out there, religious or spiritual, is absolute at all. So I'm saying all that to say, by looking at what was going on in the early part of the last 2,000 years, and to look at what was beginning to shape the organizing of what's called Christianity, did not happen immediately after the Christ showed up in Yeshua 2,000 years ago. And I know they think that. They think the church started right then. It did not. It took it a couple of 3 centuries before actually it was organized to become an organized religion called Christianity. So what's missing is the 1st century, 2nd century, and part of the 3rd century. So that's what we're doing by going back and looking at things such as Gnosticism. Gnosticism is the fact that this is something that is pre-Christian. So in this shall we find fragments of truth for all of you. You may not agree with everything that is taught in this school of thought, but I'll guarantee you, if you'll keep an open heart and an open mind, you will find something that will resonate with you, or you would not be here at all. You're here because Spirit has something to offer you. One more little Bible story that I want to give you is when the 5,000, actually 11,000 people hungered in the little fishes and the loaves story, and how it said at the end of that there was so much left over after it had been blessed, that there was 12 baskets left over, and it says, go and gather the fragments that nothing be lost. So today, may nothing be lost that the universe wants to share with us and give to us. Let's not get caught up into names. Gnosticism isn't really a name. It wasn't a people. It was an experience before a people began to call themselves Gnostic, or a community, that people. In other words, it didn't start out as a label of people. It started out as an experience. That interests me. Anything that has come from an experience is where I want to follow it back to, because I think everything that is of truth and resonates with truth starts out from an experience. I feel that way whether it is so-called Christianity, true Christianity, or Muslimism, or Hinduism, or Buddhism. If you trace all those back, you'll find that somebody had an experience, right? Buddha had an experience, sitting under the boa tree, and had an experience. So Muhammad had an experience, no doubt about it. His experience is very different from what that religion has become, just as Yeshua is very different than Christianity that it became. And all of them came from experiences that then brought in believers of the experience who did not have the experience. Are you with me? Yes. And this is where I think, for instance, Christianity has missed it. I think they're so based on a belief in Jesus, and a belief in the Christian God, and a belief in all of this, that they've left out the experience of it. So does that make sense to you, so that we can understand why that we're going back and looking at some things that mostly happened in the Roman Empire through the 1st to the 4th centuries AD. All right, let's begin and kind of just see where this all goes. Every one of you have a handout for the first part of the teaching. Quick review would be this entire revolution and revelation all began with a young peasant named Muhammad Ali al-Sammon, S-A-M-M-O-N. That is in your lesson somewhere, I think. If not, okay. He started a revolution, how we understand the early, we should say the early so-called religions of the world. While he was digging, he came upon a large earthenware jar in which he found manuscripts inside. And it changed everything up until that time that was going on. So let's talk about the word Gnostic or Gnosticism for just a moment, if we could. It's a very interesting term. It is a Greek term. The Greek language certainly influenced about everything that was going on in the Roman Empire. So Greek was the main language. Whether people spoke Hebrew, they still used Greek loan words. Or if they used Aramaic, they still mixed with Greek. It didn't matter what language there was at that time, there was such powerful Greek influence because of the power of the Roman Empire that had spread over most of the known civilized world at that particular time. So the word Gnostic is a Greek word, and it just simply means knowledge. So let me give you a simple illustration of the difference in gnosis, knowledge in the Greek, and intellectual knowledge, which are two different things completely. Intellectual knowledge is knowledge that we accumulate by reading and studying and listening, researching, and the effect of culture, society, and family. Family makes a huge part of the very early roots of how we see ourselves, each other, and the world. Very much what we call first chakra issues. That's our story. So let's say I sit here and I know a lot about the city of London. You know, I've watched it on TV, I watched the royal weddings, I've watched the royal funerals, I've seen, I can tell you in my mind a little bit about London, just by what I've read about it, seen about it, but I really don't know London because maybe I haven't been to London. Now, fortunately, I have been to London, so I didn't pick a good one there. But let's say I haven't been to London, but I could tell you, I recognize there's certain things in the skyline that I would recognize, and the famous Thames River, all of that kind of thing. So I know about it, but I don't know it. But if I've been to London and I started telling you about London from my experience of being, that would be gnosis. So when you stop and think of all the things that you think you know and believe, how much of that do you know because it's come from an experience, or it's become from the intellect itself choosing to believe in something without gnosis? So to the person who received gnosis is the person who felt they had a direct line to the true spiritual creator called the entirety. Now the names are going to change here than what we know in Christian. So instead of God, they knew it as the entirety, a spiritual being, an entity that could not in any way be defined by intellectual mind construct. Now, the reason I'm into this is because of my connection to this material. I just felt some few months ago that I needed to look at Gnosticism. And I didn't know why. I've heard of it, I've talked about it, I've thrown it out, but I didn't know it. I knew about it enough to kind of put it out in some of my talks, the Gnostics. And we got to watch that because we get these buzzwords, going that we kind of just throw out. We have no idea what they mean because we've had no experience with it at all. So I've known about Gnosticism and I've known about it on an intellectual level, but I never had any experience with it until recently. So when I decided to take the class on great courses out of the History Channel, so I took 24 classes from this wonderful gentleman here, Professor David Brake, who is a history of Christianity professor at Ohio State University. Amazing, just amazing. I mean, his training and ability was a very good classes that I attend. So, but as I begin to get into it, I start having an experience with it. And I thought, I've been kind of teaching that. That's the revelation I had back in the late 80s. Or this was what I was seeing back in 96. So I'm coming to you more out of experiencing Gnosticism than I am as an intellectual leading toward it. It is, I suppose, on some level, somewhat can be complicated. But complication is, again, relative. What you see as complicated could be really quite simple to somebody else. And what you think is just simple is very complicated to someone else. So again, you've got to realize in this 3D world we live in, most everything about it is relative. There's just no absolute, this is right, that is right, this is all right, this is all wrong. You can't do it. We're really here. One of the greatest things that we can awaken in ourselves and cultivate in ourselves and mature in ourselves is our ability to be intuitive. You've got to be guided. And that's why so many of us may have come back and back and back until we finally came into a lifetime to reach a level of consciousness that we could realize that we must give ourselves to some kind of a guidance system, like an inner GPS system. I don't know about you, but I've lived in Charlotte the last few years and I'm still trying to figure it out. This is not an easy city, the way it's laid out. Sometimes the name of the city, the street's not even there, and then you started on this street and it ends up being that street and whatever. So I'm so thankful that I have a GPS system in my car that says this is where you are and this is where you need to be going. And I believe that's what we call the Holy Spirit. The higher self in us is this guidance. Romans 8 said, those that are led by the Spirit are the children of the true God. And through this time of so much breakdown and chaos that's going on, I don't know how in the world we think we're going to make it through without guidance and intuition. So we need to work on that and practice more and more how we can do that. Now, we offer some kind of things in Soma Energetics that opens the heart and the third eye and puts those two together, because when those two come together, you've got a great intuitive system going on when you connect it together. So sometimes we need that. We've got to clear out the heart, and we've got to activate our third eye, or our ability to see through appearance and illusion. And that's the only way. If you're going to follow things as they appear to be, it says, there's a way that seemeth right, but the end thereof is death. So if we're walking what seems to be, but isn't, we're not going to find the path. And here's the other side of that. For there is a path that shines brighter and brighter and brighter unto a full day. So you're either on the path that seems right. Seems means appears to be right because your five senses. Or you're on the path that is the spiritual path toward your unfoldment of your true self or enlightenment. Get that? Path that seemeth right is death. Now, death doesn't mean just physical death there, but it means death to the memory of who you are. Death to the process of awakening. See, a lot of people are the living dead. Yeah. Even it says Paul wrote, "For they are dead in their sins," and he was talking to living people. So being dead means being dead to something. So a lot of things are still dead to us because we're not conscious of it. So you don't want to end up with all of this being shut out from you. You're here to learn it. So I suggest get on the path of the just that shineth brighter and brighter unto a full and perfect day. And then I'll end it with this. Choose this day in whom you will serve. It says, choose this day. Will you choose life or will you choose death? So, all of that was to say that this is all built upon experience. So, what of this teaching that resonates with you and awakens something in you? Hold it in your state of contemplation. Don't be quick to judge it right or wrong. Or, oh, that's good. No, that's not good. Don't do that. Wait. Wait for the universal law of resonance to take place. Because the only thing that you want to validate, and this is where your power is, people. Your power is in validating. The religion you was raised in is not the power to validate. Now, they can tell you and teach you whatever they want you to learn, but once it gets into your head, you're in your power, not theirs. Are you following me? Mm-hmm. In other words, they can't choose for you what you to believe. You take what they say and you say, I'm going to believe it. With your power, you believe it. And that's important because that keeps you out of victimization. People's going around saying, oh, I was so mistreated by the Catholic Church, and the nun came around with a ruler and hit my hand. You know, I hear all kinds of stories about people. And I've even got my stories of abuse in the Pentecostal church. There's a lot of abuse going on there. There's abuse in the Baptist church. There's abuse in all kinds. Every religion has that side of itself that was very abusive in many ways. But we don't have to carry that, is what I'm saying, because we're not a victim of it once we understand where our power is. Remember that saying? I am the center of my power. Say it with me. I am the center of my power. That's so powerful. So if I'm not the victim, and I chose to validate something into my belief system, then I have the power to undo and correct that belief and change it completely. So, wow. Let me give you one more. I got to give you one more. So let's talk about what we call Christianity. Jesus comes to Peter. Now, Peter is important here because you got to remember, Peter's going to be the first pope. of the organized Christian church. Now, metaphysically, and you that are under Fillmore and Unity know that Peter represents what? Faith. And the 12 powers is faith. So Jesus goes to Peter and says to Peter, who is everyone out there saying I am? And Peter said, well, there's a little group over here and they believe that you're Elijah. Come back. But this group says, you're Jeremiah, come back. Oh, this group said, no, that's John the Baptist. Isn't it interesting that that kind of comes under reincarnation in which nobody was rebuked? Isn't that, they didn't rebuke him saying, oh, that reincarnation stuff, that's of the devil. No, it seemed to be very much because it was taught early in the 1st and 2nd century. It was not until religion threw it out and made it a bad thing. It was accepted. But the real question that he asked Peter was, who do you say I am? What does faith tell you? I'm talking about innate faith. I'm talking about the faith you come in with, not the one you learn about. I'm not talking about belief. Don't confuse belief with faith. Now, faith can become a belief, but faith just is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. That's Bible, but it's really good. That's really good. I don't care what book it came out of. And Peter says, you are the Christ. Well, that was a different sound. That took it to a different frequency. And the response in this account is Jesus said to him, Peter, you didn't get that from flesh and blood. You got that from your Father in heaven. In other words, Peter had an experience that his spirit fathered in him. Are you with me? That's what the Father means. The Spirit gave him a revelation that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, wait a minute, I've been hearing from the same Father, which was Spirit. They're talking about Spirit. This is what the Gnostics believe, that God is an invisible, entirety spiritual being. And that Spirit is trying to talk to us all the time. And when it gets through all the layers and blind spots and all the things that we have layered up, if it gets through, you experience gnosis. A gnosis experience means that I have received directly through the Spirit mind into my mind without any filter. Gnosis is a direct line to divine mind without filtering it through any language. Even Greek, Aramaic, Latin, and any other language is a filter to what Spirit is saying. But if you bypass all the languages and go into the essence of your knowing, how many times, I know I have so much, received something and knew it, but I didn't know how to believe it. I wasn't even sure of it. My brain is like, wait a minute, do we believe this? I've checked out through the belief system and all the stuff you've brought to your brain and deposited into your brain, and I can't find where this one is anywhere in there. So I think we'll reject it because I can't find it in the belief system. So my reject button goes off. And see, this is what happens when we start hearing directly from Spirit. The brain wants to analyze it. It wants to fit it in. So you've got to be willing to experience gnosis, direct knowledge from spirit. From spirit. In this teaching, you will learn a little bit about why we have a world like the world we live in, which is full of suffering, pain, death, separation, and every ism that you can possibly name and list. My challenge to this, and even knowing what I know and have taught for years, I'm still being challenged constantly, as much as anybody, about how these things come through without filter. It's easier if I get knowledge and let it come through a filter that I've already made. Then it's easy, I get it. The brain says, I get it. But if it comes through without a filter and it's pure spirit, the only language I know is the knowing language. I just know it. And I have done my best many times, whether you know it or not, on Sundays and other times, to give you some things I know, but I'm not sure I believe yet. Because I want us to know. Then we can choose what we want to believe. So you know to believe rather than to believe to know. And most of the system says, learn, and then you'll know. I'm saying you've already got the knowing system in you.
That's right.
Then you want your belief to fit what you know. So that means you've got to be willing to continuously bring your belief system into the light, to be relooked at, to check in, and be willing for correction, or to let go of a belief that you thought so strongly was the one belief that you would always believe, sometimes is shaken. So this is kind of what gnosis is. It translates into knowledge. However, the knowledge Gnostics sought was not ordinary or factual, but rather deeper, intuitive, and esoteric understanding of reality. I do believe this is probably where the roots of esoteric teachings and mysticism came from, was from those early first centuries before everything got organized and put into its place and whatever. And thank goodness that somehow has been kept alive with those of you who have delved into mysticism and esoteric teachings. I know Jackie's very versed in that, and maybe some other of you are. But if you've been in that, it's because that was a fragment that was left over and not totally done away with. Now, as we approach the 4th century and the time of Constantine, around 315, when there was a need to have a central organized religion, as we got closer to that, which was out of fear because there were so many different groups of people. There wasn't such things as church buildings, synagogues, cathedrals, where large groups of people met in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century. They were very small groups in homes, and the Romans had bathhouses. You know why they had bathhouses? Because they were so big in baptism. Gnosticism can give you a whole different look of how the power of baptism is and the washing of the word of the water. It was huge before Christianity made it into one of their, Christian ceremonies and changed it. So Gnosticism flourished in the diverse cultural landscape of Hellenistic and Roman world where various religions and philosophical traditions intermingled. Influences from Jewish, Christian, Zoroastrianism, and pagan sources contributed to the development of Gnostic thought. I'm telling you that because when I say Gnostic thought, I'm not talking about just one thing. I'm talking about many things that came together into Gnostic thought. The influences of all these different little groups were a part of that. So I want to read to you just a moment here on the Gnostic God. Now, you that have been with me for a long time know that I've made a difference between what Jesus called his Father and the Old Testament God. Now, this is what's really grabbed me here. I didn't know that I was teaching Gnosticism. Had no idea. I was just teaching the experience that I had back in '89 when I began to see, and because I couldn't figure out why Jesus was telling all of those Jewish Christians that were filtering over into the New Testament two things. You're of your father, the devil, and you know not what you worship. That fascinated me. What was he talking about? Why did he say to them, your father is the adversary, or devil, but my Father seeks you to worship in spirit and in truth? It just became clear to me. Most of us has tried to cover up for the God of the Old Testament, and some of us have done very well to try to make this character have some spiritual meaning or goodness to it. And this is going to be the challenge for you that have been in New Thought and metaphysics for a long time, because we believe in one power, one truth, one this, one that. But what I'd like for you to contemplate is when it uses the term one, it is within the context of reality, not illusion. In the illusion is separation. In the illusion, there's division. In the illusion, I'm not you and you're not me. In the illusion, we find all the reasons for prejudice and hatred and war and all of these things. But within the realm of reality, no such thing exists. And this is where you have to choose, which God are you addressing? Please be careful with the term God. Remember, I've told you many times, one thing the brain does that deceives us is generalize. The brain just generalizes things. Table, human body, chair. Now, instead of saying, this is made of some plastic and screws and all things that make it a table, it's just a table. It never tells me what makes the table a table, all the parts. When I look at Beth and I see a woman's body, it doesn't tell me she's got 60 trillion cells and all of the things that make up that body. I don't see, I just generalize it. There's a body sitting in a chair, in a building, I'm sitting at a table, and that's the way the brain works. It just generalizes things. And that's what's changed everything by the introduction of quantum physics. Quantum physics says, wait a minute, things are just not material or an atom. That atom's made up of even more subtle things. We didn't even know it. We didn't even know they were there until we had the right equipment, the electronic microscope, yeah. Once we saw that, then we saw that things were more subtle. That was making up atoms was the spinning of electrons going around and orbiting around the nucleus, and there was a proton and a neutron. They were doing their dance and spinning around and all kinds of things. Then we found out it even got smaller, and then we found neutrinos, and we found quarks, and we found things. We just found things smaller and smaller and more subtle. And we begin to understand the nature of the material world and understand it. So be careful about God, because I want you to be aware what you're believing and what you're addressing receives your power. This is why you have to take tremendous responsibility about how you build a consciousness within yourself. This consciousness is your house. You realize you live in your consciousness? You look through the windows of your consciousness at the world. And when the windows of your house is dirty, the world looks dirty. So we go out and try to change the dirty world without cleaning our windows of perception. So the word God has a very generalized aspect. It is important that we make sure we address the true creator of who we are. And what we are is a spirit creation. So let's look at this just a moment. The best way to envision the Gnostic God is to think of, it says him, I'm going to say it, as a vast intellect, a mind similar to, much greater than our own minds. Like an intellect, God is complex, full of thoughts called aeons, and constantly active and creative. Just as we find peace within our minds are still and quiet, so too God is perfectly still and quiet. Even as it is active and creative. Further, just as we can never fully know another person's intellect, so too God is ultimately unknown to human beings. God in the Gnostic is called the invisible spirit, where all there is to God, we can never know God. Now, I've tried to deal with you by giving you my definition that was given to me, that God is a non-local, remember this, undefinable consciousness interacting with itself. So spirit to us on a human level is invisible to us. But it doesn't mean it's not there, because I can't see it, I can't hear it, I can't taste it, I can't touch it. It is there. Now, when you know that, see, you could believe that. You could say, okay, I go to a church that teaches that God is an invisible spirit, and I'm going to believe that. That's not gnosis. Gnosis is when you have that inner experience of knowing that the true living God is beyond your ability to capture in mental constructs. Then something inside of you, innate, called faith, is activated, and through that faith, you know that that's true. And you don't need proof. It's when you don't need proof and you get a knowing and you know that you know that you know that you've reached gnosis. Boy, I bet this is going to have a different meaning to you than ever before. Let this same mind be in me that is in Christ Jesus, who thought it not robbery to be equal with God. Let gnosis. Mind is gnosis. If the invisible spirit were all there is to God, we could never know God. In fact, we would not exist because the invisible spirit would be just that, eternally at rest. But again, God is like an intellect, thus the invisible spirit thinks. And its thinking produces first thought, which is called in Gnostic forethought. Forethought. Forethought is the invisible spirit's thought about itself. Just exactly what I've been trying to tell you. Let me give it to you again. God is a non-local, undefinable consciousness interacting with itself. You would not be, I'm talking you, the real, authentic you, would not existed until that invisible spirit had an experience through thought about itself. That's why it's so powerful, this term, I am. My goodness, when something that is invisible, undefinable, no infinite, no beginning, no end, no birth, no death, also has this forethought, I am. Now hear me. When it said, I am, you became. You are its forethought of itself. Read it again. Its thinking produces first thought called forethought. Forethought is the invisible spirit thought about itself. Forethought is the first eon and comes forth from the invisible spirit and is the highest level of God. Come on. I've taught you that what birthed Christ into the human story, get this right. Now I want to say it right. Into the human story was the Most High God. So go through your little Christmas story. And here's Mary. Right? Why Mary? Because she has a womb. How does that translate? For you that was here for Sandra's workshop, and shame on you that weren't. It was good. I'm going to have her repeat it. It was so good. And we may do it on a Wednesday, just so I can catch you. You have no choice. But we know that's the Vesica Pisces when you bring it down into sacred proportions, into the language that the universe used to give itself matter was through proportions. It didn't do it randomly. It did it through a sacred mathematical system. The Gnostics believed that human beings, like God's thought, ultimately came from forethought and would return to forethought. Now, in the 20th century, Gnosticism experienced a revival of interest partly due to the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library. So as these little groups of Gnostics, Essenes, now the Essenes are more attached to the Dead Sea Scrolls. How many of you heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? That's a different discovery, but they were made within a couple of years of each other. The Gnostic scripts were in 1945, and the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947, near Qumran. All this is in Egypt. But the young Bedouin shepherd who was throwing rocks into a cave and heard some glass break began to find these scrolls that become, and this is right across from the city of Nag Hammadi. And that's why they're named that, because they were found there. And there's a lot of them, and the years and years of research that has done it. But what I would say to you, why did they put these things in jars and hide them in caves? Because they saw what was coming. They knew things were getting ready to be organized into a central religion in which everything that did not believe it would be a heretic. Gnosticism is seen as a heretic language. And you say, well, I don't get into heretic. Maybe you do. Maybe a lot of what you believe is seen as a heretic. Maybe heretic is not near as bad as they've told you it was. Maybe it just means you don't agree with me. So the Essenes were heretics, the Gnostics were heretic, some of the others that we'll touch into here. There was a whole group of things going on for those first centuries that have been lost by organized religion. But in 1945, something happened that was the fulfillment of prophecy. And the prophecy is this: that before the next age fully comes in and stabilizes itself as a new norm, everything that was edited out of the previous age will be restored before that happens. You understand? We can't go over. We can talk about 5D, we can talk about the kingdom of God, you can talk about whatever, heaven, wherever you think you're going, but you can't go over until everything has been restored to you that you was promised to have access to, that has been hidden by those who have held the power of this whole last age of Pisces, of 3D, which, as we know, has hidden a lot of things. There's so much in the archives of the Vatican. So much. And in other places throughout the world. But in jars, in caves, and in digs, they have discovered that these people saw what was coming and said, we're going to preserve this before they get a hold of it, because there will be a time come in which there will be the restitution of all things spoken by the mouths of the prophets. That's what it's called, the restitution of all things spoken by the mouth of the prophets. So in 45 began the discovery of what had been hidden that we thought was lost and gone is now being found. That's why it's important to study this. I think one of the things that, if I can say, has not been successful for a lot of us who have walked this path of metaphysics, new thought, whatever you want to call it. Maybe I'm just old. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just, after 60-some years, just like, no games. I've had it. I just don't want to play the game. I don't want to play the minister game. I don't want to play the preacher game. I don't play the church game. I'm just at a place I'm really, at this point in my life, I'm serious about it. I want to know why I've not seen the manifestation of the things that we have told and believed And I think it has to do, and my time, where'd it go? I think it has to do with the fact of where are you putting your power? Which God are you serving and don't even know it? And I got 5 minutes, but I want to close with this. I have been as guilty as anybody else to try to make the illusion as real as I could. I've tried to make an excuse to why there's illness and sickness, because we need it, because it's going to help us grow. Maybe in some cases, but enough's enough. I am so tired of how many people are coming down with cancer and even in this group. I've just had it. Something isn't working, and I want to know what it is. And it's going to be basically, what are we feeding? And you will learn in Gnosticism that there is a high God who is spirit, entirety, whole, perfect, and beautiful, and you are the forethought of it, created in itself as itself. Then there is a lower aspect of a God that has made this physical material world that is a lesser creation than the highest creation. And that's why for Christ to come forth and be accessible to us, Christ is the mind of God at the human level. I'll say that to you. Christ consciousness is gnosis seated in the wilderness of the human brain. The human brain is the desert. Hear me. The desert. But you know what it says? There'll be a time that the desert shall blossom as a rose. I'm tired of being barren in my mind of all the things I want to see manifested. But in my barren desert, there is a seed that when I water it, it shall bring forth of itself and cause my deserts into a garden that I shall walk with the true and living God within my own self. That's what we got to do at HeartLight. We got to water it, we got to take care of it, and we got to bring forth the seed of the true divine consciousness and mind of a true living God. Now this will go through all of that and show you, and what it's going to boil down to is your own common sense. And remember, what overshadowed Mary to bring him forth? Anybody remember the story?
Gabriel?
No? Gabriel was the angel that came to her because she wasn't getting it in her human mind what was trying to come through her. So the angel had to come and teach her and prepare her for what was about to happen. Does anybody remember what happened? The Most High overshadowed her. The Most High true God, the invisible Spirit God, overshadowed her and brought forth the seed in her of the true Christ mind incarnate into the human story. So you have Eldaboth is their name. We call him what? The God of the Old Testament, Yahweh. Yahweh. Yahweh will always and never bring anything good to this planet and to you if you are attached with your prayers and meditation to the wrong God. Then you are amplifying that God's intention. This is why it's important to see what are we going to plug ourselves into. El Elyon, the Most High God, possessor of heaven and creator of an order called Melchizedek, of an endless life, without mother, without father, without descent. It is our true spiritual selves. So this gets definitely interesting. So you have the sheet, all of you. I've maybe got one left, but if you don't, you should have it. Keep it. You're supposed to read this on your own. I will give you each one when we're ready to move on. But I would like to get us to a place that we can discuss this. So read this. It's not that long, just a few pages. Read it. Jot down any questions you have about it or anything you'd like to share with it. And then when we come back next Wednesday, we'll start there and have a little time of discussion, a little bit about what's going on with you in reading all that. If you want the book, it's up to you. You can get it. Called Gnosticism from the Nag Hammadi to the Gospels of Judas. Or you can just let me give you these, save you money and time or however you want to do it. But I will give you each lesson printed out so that you can have it for yourself to do your own studying. Because I'm not going to study just for you. Please don't do that to me. I'm not your full guru here. I'm just facilitating. I'm just forethought. I'm just for thought to get you to think. But I'm really so asking you, find time in your life, in your week, to get out of the distraction of the simulated matrix that demands so much of your time and life, and carve out a time for your spiritual contemplation, research. Take responsibility between these services and classes. Make sure you're on your path, not David's path. Now, we've come together because somehow we connected on the path. But it doesn't make we lose our own individual personal paths. It just means we're complementary. Let me close with this. On the music-wise, we play a C. Well, everybody doesn't have to be a C, because if you're an E or a G, you're in the C chord. Huh? So everybody doesn't have to be a C. You can be an E, but C and E work together. And then if you add a third one to G, you got a C chord. They're all unique and different, but they all make the chord. So we don't have to lose our individuality and how that you are doing, but we also can be complementary to each other and grow faster together than you will by yourself. Let us take a moment. I always want to take just a little time to take all that's been said and allow you to take it to the altar of your higher self. So see yourself crossing a little bridge into a garden. And in that garden is a little temple, a beautiful, humble, little beautiful temple. I want you to go up the steps of this temple, and the door opens effortlessly. And you enter in, and there in this temple is filled with the white golden light of truth and wisdom. All that is in this temple is a beautiful altar. I'm going to invite you to walk up to that altar and put down everything that has been taught and said today on that altar. But the challenging part now is to leave it on the altar of your higher self and not bring it back into the part of you that wants to analyze it or work it mentally. But now you're saying to your higher self, teach me. Bring it to my remembrance, and I will give you the space through meditation and contemplation this week. Whether it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes, I will be still. I will be still and receive the teaching of truth in me. Take a deep breath. And so it is. Thank you so much. What a wonderful group of people you are to just be open to. I think this is fine-tuning time. Have a great day. Be careful. I understand we're going to have some interesting weather on its way, so be aware and keep safe. And we'll see you Sunday, I hope. Sunday. Thank you again so much.